Today is the 13th of May. For many in West Asia, it's Eid al-Fitr, one of the holiest days in the Islamic calendar. In Israel and Palestine, this day is marked with airstrikes, rocket bombardments, rioting and violence. The situation continues to be grim. The clashes which began last Friday have now taken the form of an ethnic conflict. This is no longer just Hamas versus Israel. The fighting has reached the civilians. It is Jews versus Arabs now. In Akkar, a city in northwest Israel, a lynching attempt by an Arab mob left a Jewish man critically injured. The images are on your screen. 31-year-old Elad Barzilai was on his way to rescue his students when his car was attacked with rocks. The mob then pulled him out of the car and beat him up with sticks. Reports say the victim is in a critical state. Meanwhile, in Bat Yam, a coastal city in central Israel, a Jewish mob tried lynching an Arab driver. Video footage that has emerged shows tens of people hitting the driver with metal objects.
זינו לו את הצורה, הוא מת, הבן אדם מת, אין בן אדם, הוא מת, הוא מת. אני לא יכול להגיד. יואו, לא מאמין. יואו. די.
These attacks have been condemned by all sides. Israel's opposition leader Yair Lapid has described the situation as a complete loss of control. He says Jews and Arabs have both declared a war on Israel. A far-right Jewish leader, Bezalel Smotrich, has said that he's shocked and ashamed at the mobbing of the Arab man. The Prime Minister of Israel, too, has called the situation intolerable. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that nothing can justify the lynching of Jews by Arabs or the lynching of Arabs by Jews.
Citizens of Israel, what is happening in the towns of Israel in recent days is intolerable. We've seen Arab rioters torching synagogues, torching cars, storming policemen, hurting peaceful and innocent citizens. This is something we cannot accept. This is anarchy. Nothing can justify it. And I will tell you more than that. Nothing can justify a lynching of Jews by Arabs, and nothing can justify a lynching of Arabs by Jews. We will not accept this. This is not us. Not this violence. Not this savagery. We will bring back governance to Israel's cities everywhere, in all cities.
As I speak, almost every major city in Israel has been gripped by unrest. Lod, Ramleh, Haifa, Acre, Bat Yam, Sakhnin, Tiberias, Tamra, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, you name it. It's a civil war-like situation. For Hamas, the situation has become another excuse to escalate its attacks on Israel. On Wednesday, rockets from Palestine hit several residential buildings in Tel Aviv, sending thousands of Israelis into shelters. Israel responded by blowing up an entire multi-story building in Gaza City. Look at this. This building is said to have housed Hamas leaders. Israeli forces claim that they had warned the occupants in advance to evacuate. The Palestinians say no such warnings were issued. They accuse Israel of targeting civilians, and so the cycle of violence continues. According to the Palestinian Health Ministry, a total of 85 people have died since the violence began. The figure is said to include 17 children and 6 women, with more than 400 others injured. On the Israeli side, a total of 7 people have been killed, 6 of them in rocket attacks, and 1 soldier who was killed after a missile struck an Israeli convoy. A total of 31 others are said to have been injured. Now, this vast disparity in the damages on both sides is further added to the condemnation of Israel in the Islamic world. There have been large-scale protests in several Islamic countries as far away as Africa and Asia. In Kenya, hundreds of young students carried out a protest march in the capital in solidarity with Palestine. The police had to fire tear gas after the protests turned violent. In Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, there were protests outside the US embassy. This was after the country's president voiced support for Palestinians. In Lebanon, pro-Palestinian demonstrators held an hours-long protest in capital Beirut. In Turkey, it seems as if the entire country is protesting against Israel. There have been large-scale demonstrations in Istanbul, Ankara and Izmir. There are protests in South Africa too. Around 2,000 people carried out a march in Cape Town accusing Israel of killing Palestinians. The march included politicians like Mandla Mandela, the grandson of late freedom icon Nelson Mandela. In the West, we're seeing demonstrations in London, where a large group of pro-Palestinian demonstrators blocked off a smaller group of pro-Israeli demonstrators. In the US, a large group of pro-Palestinian protesters gathered outside the White House in Washington, calling the American government to stop aiding Israel. Earlier today, I also spoke with Paul Hirschson, official spokesperson for Israel's foreign ministry. And I asked him if Prime Minister Netanyahu's rhetoric was adding fuel to the fire and how Israel feels about civilian casualties on either side. This is what he said. Both sides are being impacted by the violence. There are casualties on both sides. Do you believe this could have been prevented? And do you think that Prime Minister Netanyahu's strong words and rhetoric is adding fuel to this fire?
Firstly, I absolutely think this could have been avoided. There was no military conflict underway between ourselves and the Hamas for the last 2 years. When you talk about, I don't know if rhetoric is the correct word, but harsh words, I may even add to those harsh words because, and I think I did already say, we're not in the mood to put a plaster on this issue once again.
I'm just playing the devil's advocate. What about the civilian casualties on the other side?
The civilian tragedies are a tragedy. There's no question about that. And the responsibility for them lies directly at the doorstep of Hamas, both targeting our civilians deliberately and locating their military infrastructure inside sensitive civilian institutions, hospitals, schools, and mosques. It's a double war crime. It's unconscionable, it's unforgivable, and it is the responsibility of Hamas.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.